Chapter 1, The Final Lullaby. The antiseptic smell of the Dallas hospital room felt like a heavy weight in Jasmine's lungs. At 19, the world was supposed to be wide open, but for Jasmine, the walls were closing in. In her arms lay Sean, 6 pounds of perfection with a tuft of dark hair and eyes that hadn't yet decided what color they wanted to be. The social worker, a woman named Mrs. Gable, stood by the window with a clipboard. She wasn't unkind, but she was efficient. Once you sign Jasmine, the 3-day revocation period begins. After that, the placement is permanent. Jasmine's hand shook as she reached for the pen. Her mind flashed to her empty apartment, the eviction notice on the door, and the cold reality that she had 14 cents in her bank account. Jasmine, the man she loved, the father of this beautiful boy, was gone. He wasn't dead, but 14 years behind bars felt like a lifetime. She pressed the pen to the paper. The ink bled slightly like a tear. With a jagged breath, she signed her name. It was done. "Can I have a moment?" Jasmine whispered. Mrs. Gable nodded and stepped into the hallway. Jasmine pulled the blue swaddle blanket tighter. She tucked Sean's tiny hand under his chin and leaned down, her nose brushing his velvet soft cheek. "I'm coming back for you," she whispered, her voice cracking into a million pieces. "Mama can't take care of you right now. Not like this. You deserve a house with heat and a fridge full of food. But you remember my heart, okay? I'm coming back." She kissed his forehead one last time, the salt from her tears staining his skin. When the nurse came to take him, Jasmine felt like her soul was being physically ripped from her chest. She watched the hallway until the blue blanket disappeared around the corner, leaving her in a silence that screamed. Chapter 2, The Sound of Iron. Hundreds of miles away, Jasmine sat on a thin mattress in a cell that smelled of floor wax and despair. His knuckles were bruised, a reminder of a disagreement in the yard, but his mind was on Jasmine. He had a calendar sketched into the wall, counting down the days until the birth. By his math, he was a father now. When the guard called his name for his weekly phone privilege, Jasmine ran. He punched in his pin with trembling fingers. "Pick up, Jas. Pick up," he muttered. "Hello." Jasmine's voice was hollow. She sounded like a ghost. "Hey baby, is he here? Tell me he's here." Jasmine's face lit up, a rare smile breaking his hardened expression. There was a long silence. Then a sob. "Jasmine, I have something to tell you." "What's wrong? Is he okay? Is Sean okay?" The smile vanished. Jasmine gripped the receiver so hard his plastic knuckles turned white. "I gave him up," Jasmine wailed. "I signed the papers today. I couldn't do it, Jasmine. I'm losing the apartment, I have no way to feed him, and you're not here. I can't do this alone." "No." Jasmine's voice erupted, a primal roar that echoed through the high-ceilinged call center. "No. My only child." "Why, Jasmine? Why would you give away my blood?" "I had to." "You didn't have to do nothing. You wait for me." In a fit of blind, helpless rage, Jasmine slammed the receiver against the metal housing of the phone. Boom, boom, boom. The sound of plastic meeting steel rang out like gunshots. "Why? Why?" He screamed until his throat burned, but the line was dead. Jasmine had hung up. He was left in the dark, a father with no son, a man with 14 years left to rot. Chapter 3, 15 Years of Hustle. Time has a way of moving both too slow and too fast. For Jasmine, the 15 years following that day in the hospital were a blur of hairspray, flat irons, and survival. She had kept her promise to herself to get right. She had started braiding hair on porches, then moved to a booth, and now she was the most sought-after stylist in the city. From the north side to the south, if you wanted your edges laid or a silk press that lasted a month, you went to Jas. She had 2 more children now, Jas, her 15-year-old daughter who shared her fiery spirit, and Chase, her 11-year-old son who was the image of his father. But every year on Sean's birthday, Jasmine would sit in the dark with a single cupcake and a candle. She had searched, but the adoption had been closed tight. Texas law was a fortress she couldn't climb. Across the state line in Oklahoma, a 16-year-old boy named Sean was slamming a door. He didn't look like a Sean. He looked like a rebel. His foster parents, Linda and John, were kind people, the kind of people who bought organic milk and went to church. But Sean felt like a glitch in their perfect system. "I'm going out," Sean yelled. "Sean, it's a school night." Linda called out, her voice weary. Sean didn't answer. He had a bag of pills in his pocket and a chip on his shoulder the size of a mountain. He didn't know who he was, so he decided he would be whatever the police record said he was. A troublemaker. A dealer. A lost cause. As he walked down the neon-lit street, his phone buzzed. It was a girl he'd been talking to back in Texas, a girl he'd met on social media. They'd been talking for months, sharing secrets and dreams. She was the only thing that felt real. He didn't know that back in Texas, Jasmine had just walked through the prison gates for the first time in 14 years, breathing in air that didn't taste like iron. The pieces were moving. The storm was gathering. Chapter 4. The Border Crossing. The old station wagon was packed to the roof. Linda sat in the passenger seat, clutching a road map, while John gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled determination. In the back seat, Sean stared out the window at the flat, dusty horizon of the Oklahoma-Texas border. He wore his headphones at max volume, the heavy bass of a local drill track drowning out the sound of his foster parents' optimistic chatter. "It's a fresh start, Sean," John said, glancing in the rearview mirror. "New city, new school, new influences. We're moving back to Dallas because the community there is strong. We've got family friends and the school district is top tier." Sean didn't pull his headphones down. He didn't want a fresh start. He wanted to be left alone. In Oklahoma, he had a reputation. He was the kid who could get you what you needed, the kid who didn't flinch when the cops rolled by. But deep down, there was a hollow ache that no amount of street credit could fill. Every time he looked in the mirror, he saw a face he didn't recognize. He didn't look like Linda or John. He was a mosaic of features that belonged to people he had never met. As the Welcome to Texas sign flashed by, Sean felt a strange shiver. He didn't believe in destiny, but the air felt different here. It felt thicker, heavier with the scent of rain and asphalt. "I got a girl there," Sean finally muttered, sliding one earphone off. Linda turned around, a hopeful smile on her face. "A girl? Is she a good student?" "She's cool," Sean said shortly. Her name was Jazz. They'd been talking for 6 months, ever since he'd slid into her DMs after seeing a post about a local Dallas basketball game. She was funny, sharp-tongued, and didn't take any of his nonsense. She was the only reason he hadn't jumped out of the car at a gas station 3 towns back. He pulled out his phone and typed, "Just crossed the line. I'm officially a Texas boy again." Jazz replied almost instantly, "About time. Don't get lost on your way to the south side, Oklahoma." Sean smirked. He didn't know that just a few miles away, his biological mother was finishing a sew-in for a regular client, her mind drifting to the son she had surrendered a lifetime ago. Chapter 5. Shadows of the Past. Jasmine stood on the sidewalk in South Dallas, squinting against the bright Texas sun. The world was louder than he remembered. The cars were sleeker, the phones were thinner, and the people seemed to be in a constant, frantic rush. He felt like a man out of time. His first stop wasn't a bar or a party. It was a small, vibrant hair salon with a neon sign that read Jasmine's Royal Touch. He pushed the door open, the chime of the bell cutting through the sound of Drake playing over the speakers. The smell of burning hair and sweet coconut oil hit him like a physical blow. It smelled like Jasmine. Jasmine was at the back station, her back to him as she trimmed a client's ends. She caught his reflection in the large, gold-rimmed mirror. The shears froze in her hand. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The clients and other stylists went quiet, sensing the sudden shift in the room's energy. "Jasmine," she whispered, turning around slowly. He looked older. The lines around his eyes were deeper, and his shoulders were broader, etched with the hardness of a decade and a half in the system. But his eyes, those fierce, searching eyes, were the same. "I'm home, Jazz," he said, his voice gravelly. She dropped the shears onto her station and walked toward him. She didn't know if she wanted to hug him or hit him for all the years she had to struggle alone. She settled for standing right in front of him, her chest heaving. "You look good," she said, wiping a stray tear before it could fall. "Where is he, Jasmine?" Jasmine asked, his voice dropping to a low rumble. He didn't need to say the name. They both knew. Jasmine looked at the floor. "I don't know, Jasmine. I tried. I hired a private investigator 3 years ago when the business started doing well. The records are sealed tight. All I know is he was adopted by a family out of state. I lost him." Jasmine's jaw tightened. "I spent 14 years thinking about that boy. Every night. I told you to wait. I told you we'd find a way. There was no way." Jasmine snapped, her old pain resurfacing. "I was a kid. I was starving. You were behind a fence." The tension was broken by the sound of the back door swinging open. A teenage girl with long braids and a bright track jacket walked in. "Mom, I need $20 for the..." She stopped, looking at the strange man standing in the middle of the shop. Jasmine stared at her. "Jazz. This is your daughter?" Jasmine said softly. "And Chase is at practice. But Sean is still out there somewhere." Chapter 6. The New Kid. The halls of Carter High School were a labyrinth of noise and color. Sean adjusted his backpack, feeling the weight of 100 stairs. Being the new kid at 16 was a special kind of hell, especially when you carried yourself with the guarded posture of someone who had seen the inside of a juvenile detention center. He was doing his best to stay low. Linda and John had made him promise. No fighting, no selling, no trouble. If he messed up here, they were talking about military school. "Yo, new blood," a voice called out. Sean ignored it, heading for his locker. He looked at his schedule. English 4, room 202. As he turned the corner, he saw her. She was standing by a water fountain, laughing with a group of friends. She looked exactly like her pictures, only more vibrant. Her skin was the color of honey, and her eyes sparkled with a familiar mischief. "Jazz?" he said, stepping forward. The girl turned, her eyes widening. A huge grin spread across her face. "No way. Oklahoma? You actually made it?" "Told you I was coming," Sean said, a rare, genuine smile breaking through his tough exterior. "Man, you look way more stressed in person," Jazz teased, punching him lightly on the arm. "Come on, I'll show you to your class. You're lucky you ran into me. This school eats outsiders for breakfast." As they walked down the hall, Jazz linked her arm through his. To anyone else, it looked like a budding high school romance. They had been talking for months, sharing their deepest fears and their favorite songs. Sean felt a connection to her he couldn't explain, a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in 16 years. "So," Jazz said, leaning in close. "My mom is like super strict, but we're having a party Friday. You should come. I want you to meet my brother Chase. He's a pain, but he's cool." "I'll be there," Sean promised. He didn't notice the way several teachers watched them walk by, or the way the school resource officer lingered a little too long on Sean's face, noting the resemblance to a man who had been a legend in these streets 20 years ago. The clock was ticking, and the two branches of a broken tree were finally starting to grow toward one another. Chapter 7. The Boiling Point. The honeymoon phase of Sean's arrival at Carter High lasted exactly 3 weeks. The peace was fragile, held together by his daily walks with Jazz and his promise to Linda and John. But in the hallways of a South Dallas high school, reputation is currency, and Sean was a stranger trying to spend a currency no one recognized. It started in the cafeteria. A senior named K-Rock, who had been eyeing Jazz for months, didn't like the way the new kid was always whispering in her ear. "Yo, Oklahoma," K-Rock shouted, kicking Sean's chair as he walked by. "I heard they don't have nothing but cows and dirt where you from. You think you can just slide down here and take the queen's seat?" Sean felt the familiar heat rise in his chest. His heart hammered against his ribs, a rhythm he knew from a dozen Oklahoma street corners. "I ain't looking for trouble," Sean said, his voice low and steady. "Just eating my lunch." "You looking at me though?" K-Rock provoked, leaning over the table. Jazz stood up, her eyes flashing. "Back off, K-Rock. He's with me. Go find something to do besides being a hater." "Oh, he needs a girl to fight his battles?" The crowd around them began to chant. "Fight, fight, fight." Sean looked at Jazz. He saw the worry in her eyes, but he also saw the pride. He didn't want to let her down, but he also didn't want to break his promise. He stood up, grabbed his tray and walked away. The jeers followed him like a swarm of hornets. He felt small, but he stayed clean. For now. Chapter 8. The Office. The explosion didn't happen to Sean, it happened to Jazz. 2 days later, a girl named Maya, who was best friends with K-Rock's sister, cornered Jazz in the girls' bathroom. Maya made the mistake of saying Jazz was choosing a loser over her own people. The fight was short, loud, and violent. By the time the security guards arrived, Jazz had Maya pinned against the sinks, and hair extensions were scattered across the tile like autumn leaves. Because it was Jazz's second incident of the semester, the school called her mother. Jasmine was in the middle of a high-stakes color correction when her phone buzzed. When she heard "Principal's office," she felt a familiar exhaustion. Jasmine arrived at the school 30 minutes later, still wearing her black stylist's apron, her hair perfectly coiffed but her expression grim. She marched through the front doors, her heels clicking rhythmically on the linoleum. As she walked toward the main office, she saw a boy sitting on the bench of shame, outside the door. He was wearing a gray hoodie, staring at his shoes. He looked like he was waiting for someone. "Jazz." Jasmine called out as her daughter emerged from the inner office with a tear-streaked face. "Mom, I'm sorry," she started it, Jazz began. But Jasmine wasn't listening. She had stopped dead in her tracks. The boy on the bench had looked up. The fluorescent lights overhead caught the angle of his jaw, the specific curve of his brow, and those eyes. Those deep, searching eyes that she had seen in the mirror every day for 15 years. "Mom?" Jazz asked, confused. "Mom, you okay?" Jasmine didn't move. She felt like the floor was turning into water. "Sean?" she breathed, the name coming out as a ghost of a sound. Chapter 9, The Recognition. The boy on the bench stood up slowly. "Do I know you?" he asked. His voice was deeper than she had imagined in her dreams, but the cadence was pure Jai Sean. "Mom?" Jazz said for the third time, pulling on Jasmine's arm. "That's my friend from school. That's Sean, the one I told you about from Oklahoma." Jasmine's hand went to her mouth. The room started to spin. She looked at the boy, her son, and then at her daughter who was standing beside him, holding his hand for support. The horror of the realization hit her like a physical blow. "That's my son," Jasmine blurted out, the words escaping before she could filter them. Jazz dropped Sean's hand as if it were made of fire. "What are you talking about, Mom?" "You're tripping. He's my friend. We've been talking for months." "Nothing. It's a long story," Jasmine stammered, her eyes never leaving Sean's face. She saw the confusion in his eyes turn into a flicker of something else, recognition? Or perhaps just the shock of a stranger claiming him. The principal stepped out of the office. "Miss Harris? We're ready for you to discuss Jazz's suspension." Jasmine didn't hear a word. She was drowning in the past. She saw the blue swaddle blanket. She heard the boom 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 of the prison phone. She saw the 14-cent bank balance. "Are you okay, Mom?" Jazz asked, her voice trembling now. "Yes," Jasmine lied, her heart breaking all over again. "I'm fine. Just stay here." She walked into the principal's office, but her soul stayed out on that bench with the boy who had her eyes and his father's heart. As soon as the door closed, she pulled out her phone and, with shaking thumbs, sent a text to the one person who would understand the magnitude of this earthquake. "I just saw our son at Jazz's school." Chapter 10, The Misunderstanding. Jai Sean was on a construction site in North Dallas when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He wiped sweat and drywall dust from his brow before checking the screen. When he read Jasmine's text, "I just saw our son at Jazz's school," his heart did a frantic somersault against his ribs. But his mind, still adjusted to the logic of a man who had missed 15 years of context, took a wrong turn. He knew Jasmine had 2 other kids. He knew Chase was the youngest. He didn't know Sean's name had stayed the same. Why Chase at Jazz school? He hammered back. "When I get off work, I'm going to have a nice long talk with him. I'm not playing no hooking school." He was already imagining the lecture he'd give his youngest son about education being the only way out of the cycle. Jasmine sat in her car in the school parking lot, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles were white. Her phone buzzed again. She looked at Jai Sean's reply and felt a fresh wave of tears. He didn't understand. He couldn't possibly understand the cosmic joke the universe had just played on them. "No, Jai Sean," she typed, her vision blurring. "Sean. Or Sean. The first one." The silence from his end lasted for 5 minutes. "That how you know? Did you ask his name?" "There's a million kids named Sean." Jasmine looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. She looked at the eyes she had passed down. "I know," she replied. "I saw him. He's the image of you. And Jai Sean, he's been talking to Jazz. They're friends." She didn't tell him the rest. She couldn't bring herself to say that their daughter and their lost son were closer than just friends. That was a bomb for another day. Chapter 11, The Long Walk Home. Outside the school, Sean and Jazz stood under the shade of a large oak tree. The air between them had turned ice cold. Jazz was pacing, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her mind racing through every text message, every late-night phone call, and every "I miss you" they had exchanged over the last 6 months. "She's crazy, right?" Jazz asked, her voice high and tight. "My mom is just stressed out because of the fight." "She didn't mean it like that." Sean didn't answer. He was leaning against the brick wall, staring at the horizon. He thought about the file Linda and John kept in the safe, the one that said, Texas Adoption Services. He thought about the fact that he never felt like he belonged in Oklahoma. What if she did? Sean asked quietly. "Jazz, look at me." Jazz stopped pacing and looked at him. Really looked at him. She saw the way his nose curved exactly like her brother Chase's. She saw the specific shade of his skin. She saw the way he stood, the same defensive, proud posture her mother always complained about. "No," she whispered, backing away. "No, Sean. Don't say that." "I was born in Dallas," Sean said, his voice cracking. "I was adopted 15 years ago. My birth mom told me she'd come back for me." "You?" Jazz suddenly shrieked, the realization hitting her like a physical wave of nausea. "Oh my God, you. We were We were talking. You said I was cute. I said you were fine. She looked like she wanted to scrub her brain with bleach. The romantic tension that had been building for months didn't just evaporate, it curdled into a thick, awkward horror. Chapter 12. The Dinner Invitation. The atmosphere in Jasmine's house that evening was suffocating. She had called Linda and John. The number had been in the school's emergency contact system. After a 2-hour phone call filled with crying, shouting, and legal threats, a fragile truce had been reached. They needed to meet. They needed to tell the children the truth. Jasmine spent the afternoon cooking. It was a nervous habit. She made smothered pork chops, mac and cheese, and collard greens, the meal she had imagined feeding her son for over a decade. Jaishan arrived first. He was wearing his best button-down shirt, his hair freshly faded. He looked terrified. "Jazz, I don't know if I can do this," he whispered in the kitchen. "You have to," Jasmine said, smoothing his collar. "He's right outside." A knock came at the door. John and Linda walked in, looking like they were walking into a lion's den. And behind them stood Sean. He looked at Jasmine. Then he looked at Jaishan. The resemblance was so striking that John, the foster father, let out a small, defeated sigh. He knew right then that the biological pull was something no paperwork could ever truly erase. "Everyone sit down," Jasmine said, her voice trembling. They gathered around the long dining table. Jazz sat as far away from Sean as humanly possible, her face buried in her hands. Chase sat at the end, looking back and forth between everyone, completely lost. "Sean," Jasmine began, reaching across the table. 15 years ago, I made a choice because I thought I had no other choice. I never stopped looking for you." Sean looked at the plate of food, then at the man sitting across from him. "You're the one who was locked up?" Jaishan nodded, his eyes wet. 14 years. I missed it all. But I'm here now. I'm never going anywhere again." Jazz let out a loud, dramatic groan of pure agony. "Can we talk about the elephant in the room?" "I was talking to my brother." EW. The tension in the room snapped. Despite the gravity of the situation, Sean couldn't help it. He let out a short, dry laugh. "Yeah," he muttered. "That's definitely going to be a problem." Chapter 13. The Scientific Seal. The laughter at the dinner table died down quickly, replaced by a heavy, clinical reality. While the physical resemblance was undeniable, Linda and John, protective as ever, insisted on a formal DNA test. They needed more than a mother's intuition and a coincidence at a high school to upend their lives. 2 days later, the group met at a testing center in a neutral suburb. The atmosphere was sterile and awkward. Jasmine and Linda sat on opposite ends of the waiting room, two mothers linked by the same boy, one by blood and one by law. Jaishan paced the hallway, his boots squeaking on the linoleum. He felt like he was back in court, waiting for a verdict that would define his freedom. Sean sat between them all, feeling like a science project. A technician in blue scrubs emerged, carrying a kit of cotton swabs. "It's just a quick rub on the inside of the cheek," she explained. As the swab touched his skin, Sean looked at Jaishan. The older man was watching him with an intensity that was almost painful. It wasn't the look of a stranger, it was the look of a man trying to memorize a face he'd been dreaming of for 5,000 nights. "We'll have the results in 48 hours, the technician said. Those 48 hours were a blur of silence. Sean went back to his foster home, but he couldn't stop looking at his hands that were shaped exactly like the man he'd seen at the salon. When the email finally arrived, Linda called Jasmine. The results were 99.9%. The paper didn't just confirm a biological fact, it officially ended the life Sean had known. He wasn't just a foster kid from Oklahoma anymore. He was Sean Harris, the son of a Southside legend and a queen of the salon. Chapter 14. The Sibling Cold War. The news hit the school like a wildfire. At Carter High, secrets traveled faster than the morning bell. By Monday, everyone knew that the new couple everyone had been shipping was actually a long-lost brother and sister. Jazz spent the entire day with her hoodie pulled tight around her face. Every time she saw Sean in the hallway, she did a literal 180-degree turn and walked the other direction. "You can't hide forever, Jazz?" Sean called out during lunch as he saw her duck behind a vending machine. "Stay away from me, blood relative," she yelled back, her voice muffled by her fleece. "I need at least 3 to 5 business years to process this trauma." Sean sat down at a table, feeling a strange mix of relief and annoyance. For the first time in his life, he wasn't looking over his shoulder for the cops or looking for a deal. He was looking at a sister who was genuinely embarrassed by his existence. It was normal. Chase, the 11-year-old, was the only one who took it in stride. He started following Sean around like a shadow. So, did you really go to jail in Oklahoma? Chase asked that evening when Sean came over for dinner. No, I was in juvie. There's a difference, Sean muttered, though he felt a twinge of shame saying it in front of his little brother. Cool, Chase said unaffected. Can you show me how to do that crossover move you did in the driveway? Mom says I'm too slow, but Dad says I just need to work on my footwork. Sean paused. Dad. Chase was talking about Jasmine. The word felt like a mountain Sean wasn't ready to climb yet, but seeing the way Chase looked at him, with pure, uncomplicated admiration, made the mountain look a little less steep. Chapter 15. The New Rules. With the DNA confirmed, the two families had to figure out a co-parenting structure that didn't exist in any handbook. Linda and John were still Sean's legal guardians, but Jasmine and Jasmine were his lifeblood. They held a meeting at a local park, sitting at a wooden picnic table. Jasmine looked at John. Both men were silent, sizing each other up. One had raised the boy, the other had given him his soul. I want him to stay in school, Jasmine said, breaking the silence. No more selling. No more street life. I didn't do 14 years for him to do 15. We agree, John said firmly. But he needs structure. He's been through a lot of transition. Jasmine looked at Sean, who was sitting on the grass playing a game on his phone with Chase. I want him to come to the shop on Saturdays. I want him to see what hard work looks like. And I want him to know his family. Sean looked up from his phone. What if I want to just be a kid for a minute? The four adults looked at him. For the first time, they realized that while they were fighting over who got to guide him, Sean was just trying to figure out how to breathe in a world that had suddenly gotten very crowded. You can be a kid, Jasmine said, her voice softening. But you're a Harris kid now. And in this family we don't just survive. We show up. Just then Jazz walked up holding 2 ice creams. She hesitantly handed one to Sean. Here. But don't think this means we're friends. You're still a dork. Sean took the cone and smiled. It was the first time he felt like the fresh start John had promised might actually be real. Chapter 16. The Oklahoma Shadow. Texas was supposed to be a clean slate, but the digital age doesn't allow for secrets to stay buried across state lines. While Sean was busy learning the rhythm of South Dallas, his old life in Oklahoma was vibrating in his pocket. A series of frantic DMs and missed calls from a burner number finally forced him to answer. Yo, Sean, you think you can just bounce with the product and the re-up money? The voice on the other end was cold. It was D-Lo, a mid-level dealer Sean had worked for to keep his pockets full back in Oklahoma. I moved, man. I told you I was out, Sean whispered, ducking into the school gym's locker room. Out don't mean free, lil, homie. You owe the circle $3,000. I know you're at Carter High. I seen your sister's TikTok. Nice hair salon your mama got too. Be a shame if something happened to that glass front. The blood drained from Sean's face. He wasn't scared for himself, he was terrified for Jasmine. He had just found her. He had just seen the pride in her eyes when she looked at him. He couldn't be the reason her dream shattered. I'll get it to you, Sean said, his voice trembling. Just stay away from them. He hung up and slumped against the lockers. He was back in the trap. The walls weren't brick and mortar this time, they were made of debt and the fear of losing the only people who truly knew his name. Chapter 17. The Night Shift. Sean started acting out. He skipped dinner 3 nights in a row, claiming he was at the library. In reality, he was back on the corners of a neighborhood he didn't know, trying to move weight fast enough to pay off a ghost from his past. He was desperate, and desperation makes you sloppy. One Tuesday night, a black SUV pulled up slowly beside him. Sean reached into his waistband, expecting a customer or a rival. Instead, the window rolled down to reveal the stony, scarred face of Jasmine. Get in, Jasmine said. It wasn't a request. The drive was silent for 10 minutes. Jasmine drove deep into an industrial area where the streetlights were flickering and dim. He pulled over and turned off the engine. I did 14 years so you wouldn't have to do one day, Jasmine said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. I seen you out here. I seen the way you're looking over your shoulder. Who is it? Sean broke. He told him everything, the debt, D-Lo, the threats against the salon. He expected his father to yell, to hit him, or to turn him over to Linda and John. Instead, Jasmine reached out and put a heavy hand on Sean's shoulder. You're a Harris, Jasmine said. We don't pay for peace. We earn it. You give me that phone. I'm going to handle this Oklahoma business. And if I ever see you on a corner again, I won't need a judge to lock you up. I'll be your warden. You understand me? Sean nodded, tears finally spilling over. For the first time in 16 years, he didn't have to be the man of his own house. He had a father to stand in the gap. Chapter 18. The Protection. The following Saturday, a car with Oklahoma plates rolled slowly past Jasmine's royal touch. Two men sat inside, eyeing the vibrant storefront. Before they could even put the car in park, three large black trucks boxed them in. Jasmine stepped out of the lead truck, followed by four men he had known since before he went inside. Men who had stayed loyal and gone legit, but still carried the weight of the streets in their eyes. Jasmine walked up to the driver's side window of the Oklahoma car and tapped on the glass with a heavy ring. "I hear you're looking for a debt," Jasmine said, leaning down. He didn't show a weapon. He didn't have to. The sheer aura of a man who had survived 14 years in the toughest units in Texas was enough to freeze the air. "We just want what's ours," Delo's associate stammered, looking at the reinforcements surrounding them. "The boy is mine," Jasmine said softly. "The debt is canceled. If I see this car in the 214 area code again, you won't be worried about money. You'll be worried about oxygen. Now turn this boat around and head north. Don't stop until you see dirt and cows." As the car sped away, Jasmine looked at the salon window. He saw Jasmine looking out, her hand over her heart. Behind her stood Sean, watching his father handle a problem he thought would kill him. Jasmine gave a single sharp nod to his son. The past was paid for. The future was finally open. Chapter 19. The Family Table. The smell of nutmeg and slow-roasted turkey filled Jasmine's house. It was Thanksgiving, the first one where every seat at the table was filled. Jasmine had gone all out, decorating the dining room in gold and deep burgundy. She wanted everything to be perfect. A visual apology for all the years they had missed. Linda and John arrived with a homemade pecan pie, looking slightly nervous but grateful. They had seen the change in Sean since the Oklahoma incident. He was focused, staying for tutoring after school, and he had stopped jumping every time the doorbell rang. Jasmine sat at the head of the table, looking at the assembled group. To his left was Jasmine, the woman who had held onto a hope he thought was dead. To his right was Sean, his son, and Chase, his youngest. And across from him was Jazz, who was currently staring at her phone to avoid making eye contact with anyone. "No phones at the table," Jasmine said firmly. "Mom, I'm literally recording a story time about how my life is a soap opera," Jazz groaned, but she slid the phone into her pocket. "Let's say grace," Jasmine said, reaching out his hands. As they all linked fingers, Sean felt a strange warmth. On one side, he held the hand of the woman who had raised him. On the other, the sister he'd accidentally tried to date. It was messy, complicated, and entirely theirs. Chapter 20. The Lingering Sting. Despite the holiday spirit, the awkwardness between Sean and Jazz hadn't fully evaporated. Every time they were in the same room, a cloud of what if hung over them. After dinner, the kids retreated to the backyard. The Texas air was crisp and a small fire pit was crackling. Sean was tossing a football with Chase when Jazz finally spoke up. "So," she said, kicking a stray leaf, "are we ever going to talk about it, or are we just going to be weird forever?" Sean caught the ball and sighed. "It was a mistake, Jazz. Neither of us knew. I liked talking to you because you were the first person in this state who didn't look at me like a criminal." Jazz looked up, her expression softening. "And I liked talking to you because you didn't treat me like Jasmine's daughter, or the track star. You just treated me like me." "Well," Sean smirked, "now you're stuck with me as a brother. Which means I get to vet all your future boyfriends and tell them I have a dad who did 14 years. You're never going on a date again." Jazz let out a dramatic scream. "You? That is literally worse than the dating thing. You're going to be a protective big brother? I hate it here." She threw a handful of grass at him, and for the first time in weeks they laughed, not as two people with a confused past, but as siblings finding their rhythm. Chapter 21. The Secret Gift. As the night wound down and the guests prepared to leave, Jasmine pulled Sean aside into her small home office. On the wall were framed photos of Jazz and Chase at every age: first steps, school plays, birthdays. In the center was a small, empty silver frame. "I kept this here for 15 years, Jasmine said, her voice thick with emotion. "I told myself that one day the person who belonged in it would come home." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, tattered blue scrap of fabric. Sean recognized it immediately. It was a piece of the swaddle blanket from the day he was born. "I kept a piece of it," she whispered. "And I kept this." She handed him a heavy gold watch. On the back it was engraved, "To Sean. Love Mom and Dad. 2010. "I bought it the year you would have turned one," she explained. "I didn't have much then, but I saved every tip from the salon for 6 months. I wanted you to have something from us, even if I couldn't give it to you then. Sean took the watch, the gold cool against his palm. He looked at Jasmine, seeing not just the successful stylist, but the 19-year-old girl who had been forced to make an impossible choice. I'm not mad anymore, Ma, Sean said softly. Jasmine let out a sob of relief and pulled him into a hug. Outside the window, Jai-Sean was laughing with John over a car engine. The family wasn't traditional and it wasn't perfect, but it was finally whole. Chapter 22, The Road to the Stage. The final year of high school moved like a high-speed train. For Sean, the transition from the kid from Oklahoma with a record to Sean Harris, senior class vice president, was nothing short of a miracle. With Jai-Sean keeping him grounded and Jasmine's relentless drive pushing him, Sean discovered he had a talent for more than just survival. He was a natural leader. But the pressure was high. He was balancing his studies at Carter High with Saturday shifts at the salon, where Jasmine taught him the business side of things. Meanwhile, Jai-Sean took him to construction sites, teaching him how to build something from the ground up. It's not just about the money, son, Jai-Sean said one afternoon, wiping sweat from his forehead as they stood on a half-finished roof. It's about knowing that when you leave a place, it's better than how you found it. Sean looked out over the Dallas skyline. For the first time, he didn't feel like a guest in the city. He felt like he owned a piece of it. He was finally building a foundation that didn't have any cracks. Chapter 23, The Acceptance Letter. One afternoon in April, the mail arrived with a thick envelope addressed to Sean Harris Porter, a hyphenated name he had chosen to honor both sets of parents. The whole family gathered in Jasmine's living room. Linda, John, Jasmine, Jai-Sean, Jazz, and Chase all stood in a tight circle, holding their breath. Sean tore the envelope open. His eyes skimmed the text. I'm in, he whispered. Full ride to Texas Southern University. Engineering program. The house erupted. Jasmine screamed and grabbed Linda in a hug that bridged 15 years of heartache. Jai-Sean picked Sean up off the floor, letting out a roar of triumph that echoed through the neighborhood. Jazz rolled her eyes, but she had a massive smile on her face. I guess that means you're moving to Houston. Thank God I finally get some space. She then walked over and gave him a fierce hug. I'm proud of you, big brother. Even if you are a nerd. Sean looked at the letter, then at the two mothers and two fathers who had fought in their own ways to get him to this moment. The boy who was once given up had been picked up by a whole village. Chapter 24, The Full Circle. The night before graduation, Jasmine took Jai-Sean back to the spot where it all began, the hospital parking lot. They sat in Jai-Sean's truck watching the neon signs of the city flicker. I used to sit here and cry until I couldn't see the road, Jasmine admitted, her voice soft. I felt like I failed him. I felt like I failed you. Jai-Sean reached over and took her hand. His calloused fingers interlaced with hers. You didn't fail, Jazz. You survived. You gave him a chance to have a life I couldn't give him from a cell. And look at us now. We're all here. I never thought he'd come back, she whispered. He didn't just come back, Jai-Sean replied. He brought us back to life. They sat in the quiet for a long time, the ghosts of their 19-year-old selves finally finding peace. The debt was paid. The cycle was broken. Chapter 25, The Graduation. The air at the stadium was electric. Thousands of families cheered as the class of 2026 marched onto the field in their blue and gold robes. In the front row of the stands, a unique family unit sat together. Linda and John on one side, Jasmine and Jai-Sean on the other, with Jazz and Chase sandwiched in the middle. When the name Sean Harris Porter was called, the entire row stood up. Sean walked across the stage with his head held high. He shook the principal's hand, but his eyes were locked on his family. He saw Jasmine wiping tears with a silk handkerchief. He saw Jai-Sean standing tall, his chest puffed out with a father's pride. He saw Linda and John waving frantically. As he moved his tassel from right to left, Sean thought back to the whisper in the hospital. I'm coming back for you. His mother had kept her promise. It hadn't happened the way she planned, and it had taken longer than anyone wanted, but the love had acted like a compass, guiding them all home. After the ceremony, the family met on the field. They took one final photo, Sean in the middle holding his diploma, flanked by all four of his parents. You okay? Everyone look happy. Jazz shouted as she held up her phone to take the selfie. On 3, 1, family. The camera clicked, capturing a moment of pure, hard-earned joy. The boy who was once a secret was now a legacy. The circle mended. 5 years after that graduation day, the broken circle gathered once more, not at a school or a testing center, but at the grand opening of Harris & Son Engineering. Sean stood at the podium, looking out at a crowd that included his mentors, his friends, and the two families that had shaped him. Jazz was there, now a successful social media manager for her mother's ever-expanding salon empire. Chase was a star athlete heading to college himself. And in the front row, Jasmine and Sean sat hand in hand with Linda and John. They weren't just biologicals and fosters anymore. They were a tribe. Sean looked at the golden watch on his wrist, the one Jasmine had saved for him. He realized then that a circle doesn't have to be a perfect, smooth line. Sometimes, the strongest circles are the ones that have been broken and welded back together, reinforced by the fire of truth and the strength of forgiveness. "We made it," he whispered to the room. And for the first time in his life he knew exactly where he belonged. "We are one big happy family." The end.